Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Redemption Thursdays with Rabbi Pinchas Winston, world-renowned Torah scholar, teacher, writer, and lecturer from Telstone, Israel. You can buy one of his many books and articles and website on his website, 36.org, as you can see. And also you can visit Amazon.com to buy one of his many books or videos or any kind of teachings you would want to learn about with everything, every topic from Jewish history to Geula to reincarnation and many other topics that are really amazing and interesting and very deep. Tonight we are talking about leaving our normal topic. We've been doing a series on the world of lies, and we call it sheker and in Hebrew. And tonight we are going to, of course, address the upcoming commemoration of the destruction of our holy temples. We call it Tisha B'Av because it's on the 9th of Av. Rabbi Winston will explain. And his topic tonight is Tisha B'Av, what is really missing? What are we really missing? Are we missing the Torah? Are we missing the temple? Rabbi, please enlighten us. And without further ado, Rabbi Winston, tonight's broadcast, of course, is brought to you by Rabbi Winston, of course, and the Geula Hour, the Miriam Project Geula Hour, and BringThemHome.org, and Israel 365 and Israel Torah. Thanks, Rabbi Winston, for joining us.
Okay, thanks. It's a difficult task, for sure, because it's very hard to describe to somebody else an experience they haven't had, especially if you haven't had it yourself. And we're a generation born to generations that have never known what it means to have a temple. On the surface of it, it sounds like, well, everybody's had temples, and people have temples to this very day. They lose their temples, so they're sad about that, and they lose their mosque, and they lose their church, and they're sad about that. So Jewish people had a temple, 2 temples to be exact, and so they lost them, so they're sad about them. But it's very different, very different. And to try to explain how and what and why and all, that's not so hard. Words are words, but to try to give a feeling of it, that you can feel something, and on Tisha B'Av it really hits home. That's a more difficult task, and within 45 minutes, especially. But Ms. Belsham will try to provide some perspective on the whole thing. I heard and I read many years ago that we have lost large sections of Torah. We know that. That's not a chiddush. It's nothing new. But it was once, it's written down that we lost 600 Sadarim of Mishnah. 600 Sadarim of Mishnah. Now, a Seder is like a whole collection of different topics. For example, that you have in Zroyim, which is the first Seder of Mishnayos, you have Brachos, the first tractate that deals with the laws of blessings. Then it moves into, Zroyim means seeds. So the whole thing deals with food and agricultural laws. You have Mitzvahs of Pei and Truma and Meiser, all these tithings that we do in the first. It's very comprehensive. The Gemara doesn't discuss all these things, although Yerushalmi does. But because the Talmud Bavli, which is the main one that we learn in yeshivas, is more focused on what practical halacha, and so things that to do more with temple times, it sort of sidesteps. But the Yerushalmi, which was from Eretz Yisrael, the Gemara, does actually have these tractates and talks about them. And then you go into Mawid, which deals with the holidays, and you go into Nashim, which deals with the laws of male-female relationships, and on top of that, vows and different topics to do with that. Then you have the Zikim, which deals with damages and property ownership and that type of thing. And then you have Kodashim, which deals with the sacrifices and as well as the laws of kashrus, etc. And then you have the last, which is Tarot, which deals with the laws of purity. Because we have laws of purity. The times of the Beis Hamikdash, you had to be spiritually pure to go to the temple, and you actually lived in a state of spiritual purity. And if you became defiled in some spiritual way, there was a process. There was the red heifer, the part, many other, etc., etc. And it's quite comprehensive. If you look at all the Mishnayos, for sure, the Gemara itself not so much, but as much, still quite comprehensive. And the truth is, even in the other tractates, it does address many of these topics, just by the way. But these are 6 Sedarim, and we know the Torah is divided into 2 parts: Torah Sheba'al, Torah Sheba'al Peh, the written law, which is the 5 books of Moshe. We take as a scroll out of the Aron HaKodesh and Shabbos, read from that, and then you have Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral law, which details the written law. You cannot live by the written law without the oral law. That's for sure, because there's not enough instructions in the written law to tell you how to put on tefillin, what tefillin are, kashrus, how to shech properly. It's all part of the oral law, which most part is Shulchan Aruch and the Rambam and different, and of course the Gemara eventually wrote it all down. And when you go through all of that, you feel you've gone through all of Torah. On what level? That depends upon the individual. But all of Torah, for the most part, and even if something's missing, how much could be missing? What other sections of law is there to learn that we're not, and that's 6 Sedarim, we're missing 100 times that information? How is that possible? What else could there possibly be to learn? And then I saw about 2 years ago, something very similar. You learn Kabbalah, and it's very extensive. The Rizal, and for those who learn the Rashash, and before that the Ramak, and after that you have others for him, that have come along, the Gra, and the main body of Kabbalistic literature, so to speak, and it's extremely extensive and very complicated and very difficult to comprehend, and getting your head around most of it takes a long time, and usually it's called Kabbalah because it means received. You have to have a tradition, you have some of a Rabbi, a teacher. It's very hard to learn on your own. And then the Leshem, one of the main people who in the last 100 years or so, one of the main Kabbalists, in one of his works where he's discussing the origins of creation and from a Kabbalistic perspective, which goes back before Ma'aseh Bereshis, and all the details of history from a Kabbalistic perspective. And he points out that, by the way, don't think that you're getting the whole story here. As much as you're learning Kabbalah, this is a fraction of what there is to learn. We lost that. We don't have that. So whatever you're learning, it's not really the full story. I don't even know how much of the story actually is. And you're scratching your head thinking to yourself, well, if this isn't it, and I'm having a tough time with all of this, how much more can there possibly be? How much could be missing? We're talking about creation from top to bottom. Everything that ever existed, everything that God ever created, at least it revealed to us. And it's extensive and intensive. So what's missing? So it reminds me, and it's very similar to something else that we have seen before, and you have to hang in there because we'll get back to the temple at some point in time, that we have 2 sets of tablets. We call the Luchas Rishonos and Luchas Shnos. The first set of tablets, the second set of tablets, right? Everyone knows the story. Moshe was given a set of tablets on top of Mount Sinai, and God said, go down the mountain because your people, meaning the heir of Rav, the mixed multitude, they've gone astray, and they built the golden calf, and they're worshiping it, and you got to go down. And Moshe knows what's coming up. He knows, maybe perhaps he doesn't see fully in his mind's eye what's going on down there, but he understands to a large degree, and he knows he's going to break the tablets. And there's a whole discussion as to why he has to do it, why he does it, and we've talked about it before also in the past. And he goes down and breaks the tablets, and that's the end of the first set of tablets. So literally, he takes them, he grinds them down, puts them in the water, and to test to see who's guilty of being involved in the golden calf, he makes a mixture of the dust from the tablets with the water, and they drink it like the mei sota, like the adulterous woman has to do in temple times to prove her innocence or guilt. And those who are guilty are found out, and they're duly executed, or they die from whatever they drink, and those who are innocent are saved, and that's whatever left over after that is put into the Aron HaKodesh. And then he has to go back up, right? That takes place at the end of the first 40 days. This is during the next set of 40 days. He goes back up the mountain again to beg for forgiveness. And then for the third set of 40 days, God sends him back down and says, now you have to hewn out your own set of tablets, and I'll write on them this time. I wrote the last time I carved them out and I wrote on them. This time you'll carve them out because you broke them, and I'll write on them. So that's, in a sense, an even bigger miracle. I mean, that God would carve out tablets and then write in them. Okay, that makes perfect sense. God does the whole thing. But for Moshe to be able to carve out tablets and God to write on them, that's extremely significant. It's quite the feat. And he does that, and he goes up and he gets the Ten Commandments. He gets all the Torah, all over again, and he comes back down with the second set of tablets on Yom Kippur, the end of the 40 days, and presents them to the Jewish people. And it's a lower level. It's a lower level, and people just assume it's the exact same, tablets all over again, just repeated, and it's not true. What happened instead was the first set of tablets only had 2 mitzvahs on them. Kabbalah explains, not the way traditionally that's taught, right? But they only had 2 mitzvahs on them. Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am the Lord your God, v'lo hiye Elohim acharim, and there should be no other gods besides me. The first is a positive mitzvah, and the second is a negative mitzvah. The reason why there's only 2 mitzvahs, because what happened to the other 611 mitzvahs? And they're all eternal. So they had to have been somewhere. Where'd they go? Why are they not there? So the answer is because the Jewish people, when they said Nasa b'nishma, they accepted Torah on such a high level, they actually became immortal once again, and like angels, and therefore they had no Yetzer Hara anymore. How the golden calf happened? That's a discussion to itself. But they, at least temporarily, they were elevated to such a level that when they fulfilled the one positive mitzvah of Anochi Hashem Elokecha, they were able to fulfill all 248 mitzvahs at the same time because they did it on such a high level. And when they performing the negative mitzvah of not having gods other than me, God says, right? So that was able to take care of the other 364 negative mitzvahs that they had to do. But once they sinned with the golden calf and they dropped back down to being mortal once again, to being what they were before they rose up to such a high level, so now they became like everybody else. And like everybody else, it's not enough just to tell someone, be a mensch, do the right thing. It's amazing, be a good person. And how many people think they're being a good person by doing certain things that other people would never do? Oh, I didn't realize it. I didn't know that mattered to you. I didn't understand that bothered you. I didn't understand that was a problem. I thought that was, all rationalizations, but you have to spell it out. If you want to make sure that the job gets done right, never assume that people can fill in details for themselves unless they've proven they understand what you've told them to do. Otherwise, it just pays to detail everything. I worked in the building industry for many years, and mistakes always happen, and sometimes they were catastrophic, and sometimes they were just expensive, and to make sure that didn't happen, you have a book of details this thick, even just showing, how bolts have to be put together into the plates to make sure it's all done properly, because lives could be at stake, right? So likewise, how much more so when it comes to Torah, which not only rectifies the person, but also rectifies the world. So on the first set of tablets, that level, it was the same Torah, but in a much higher level, a much more profound level, much deeper level. The second set of tablets was for the Jewish people living back in the everyday world of Yetzer Hara, which means we had to talk about cause and effect, and we had to talk about reward and punishment, and the consequences for doing the wrong thing, and the blessing for doing the right thing, and all, and talk in such details and detail everything. And when I say detail, I mean detail. We have the written law itself details, and the Gemara details that, and then we have commentaries that detail, or the Mishnah details that, and the Gemara details the Mishnah, and then countless commentaries to detail the Gemara unto this very day. We're adding more details and explaining more things, not because we know more, because we know less. And therefore, and we're on a lower spiritual level, so we have to be told explicitly what to do. So there's a much more profounder level of Torah, the first set of tablets, because it was on the level of what we call Yemos Mashiach, the Messianic era, and Tisha, and really Olam Haba. But what the Kabbalists call Torah Tzitzilis, which is extremely high level that nobody has ever been able to reach. Even Moshe Rabbeinu did not live on that level. We will eventually, God willing, and Adam Rishon did before he did his sin. But it's so high up, and therefore on that level you're like an angel. So you are. There's no other way but to be in the same page as God. Down here, it's very possible not to be on the same page as God. So the same thing with the Mishnah. Whatever is missing may not be additional laws, additional topics, or Kabbalah as well. It might be more topics. I mean, probably some, right? But not like tons more. But the depth of understanding and learning the Leshem explains that had we received the first set of tablets and someone were to learn the Torah on that level, immediately it would change them without even having to think about it. It would just like go in them and be mashpia and influence them, and not just them, but everybody else around them. Your neighbors would all of a sudden feel spiritually uplifted because you're learning Torah. And imagine if the whole nation's learning Torah like Chizzy time, but that's all, that's already post the sin. So, but that type of learning before, the world would just go from level to level to level to be rectified. And you can't begin to imagine what that would look like because we've never experienced it. Even Shabbos doesn't really tell the story at all compared to what it once was. The second not automatically change the person to learn it, or not only does it not automatically change the people around you while you're learning it, it doesn't even change the person. In the 1800s, they implemented what was called a Musar Seder in yeshivas. Musar is really the topic of dealing with character refinements, right? To take Torah ideas and to implement them, to make yourself a better person, a Baal Midah, someone who's serving God on a much higher level, and fulfilling their potential spiritually. Why have to add a Musar Seder? The Brisker Rav was famous for saying that I don't need a Musar Seder because every time I learn Gemara, it's a Musar Seder. And that's true, and it's supposed to be, but that's not what else learns. We had to put a Musar Seder in to compensate for the lack of influence that Torah has over us to this very day. And that's why you find such inconsistency. So many times you hear the complaints, how people learn Torah a whole day, and they can be exposed to Torah on an ongoing basis, and yet do things that just don't seem consistent with somebody who's on that kind of a level, or should be on that kind of a level. And yeah, it's partly their fault because they're not working hard enough to integrate it, but it's also the reality of the level of Torah we have right now. And that fundamental difference is between being like one with it and a part of it, and to feel it, and every aspect of the joy also that you get from it would be so much more tremendous. I once heard a story, fiction, I assume. I can't believe it'd be a real story, but it kind of, it was part of a book of other stories. It wasn't specifically on this topic, but this particular story was on the topic. And it was about a group of Jews who had sailed on a ship, I guess, for business purposes someplace else. And on the way back, they became shipwrecked on some island. It was during temple times. Second temple, but probably the first temple would be more meaningful because the first temple was more impactful, more dramatic. And they were marooned on an island, and they had to build a life for themselves, and they immediately set out to try and rebuild the ship so they could get back home again. It took several years before they could do it. Finally, after living there, minyanim, everything they had to do to try to compensate for their life on this island, they finally completed their ship, and they put it together, and they set sail for Eretz Yisrael. And lo and behold, they got there. It took several days to get back, and they got there. And as they got there, the first thing they wanted to do was run to Yerushalayim, run to the base of Mikdash, bring a sacrifice to thank God for taking care of them. And they came ashore, and they saw people, who were there. They noticed that people were looked very broken and very lacking in life, and it just didn't seem like the same kind of people that they left behind. They asked, what's the matter? Why is everyone so down, so depressed, so sad? And they had the news. What news? The temple was destroyed. No, it's not possible. No, it was destroyed. They came and destroyed the temple. It was burned and destroyed. There's no temple. There's no base of Mikdash. And the people who had just come back and had immediately wanted to run the base of Mikdash were so distraught and so broken that they they were ashore in the water somewhat, and they fell to their knees, and they cried and they cried and they kept crying, and eventually their souls just left them, and they died. They could not have, and sad story, and it kind of like, even as a fiction, there's a reality to it that's real, that should be real to all of us. That's the way we should all feel. I was once walking up, I used to go to the Kotel once a week, and when I used to live near in the old city, even more times a week, and was once walking up from the Kotel, the Western Wall, up the long stairs there towards the old city, Jewish quarter, and I looked back towards the Kotel just to see it again on my way out, and I was high enough now to see the whole mosque, basically the mosque that's on top of the Temple Mount, and it literally just like struck me, and I couldn't believe it. The more I thought about it, I just couldn't believe I had gotten used to this, that there was a mosque there, and I lived as if that mosque belongs there. That's its place, and our place is down by the Kota, which is only a retaining wall. It's not even a wall of Beis Hamikdash, it's a retaining wall, and it has a halach of a Beit Knesset. We treat it that way. People come there from all over the world, and they feel different, and it's like, but that's where we're supposed to be. They're sitting on the Temple Mount, and I'm walking away from the Kotel like, well, Baruch Hashem, Daven Mincha, feel good. Was at the Kotel, special opportunity, and is great, but it's not. And I wonder that, how many other people down there are even thinking about this? I mean, Tisha B'Av, we do. And that's why we have Tisha B'Av. Thank God the rabbis are smart enough, they're always smart, but they're, they put into our schedule the 3 weeks, which no one looks forward to, no one wants to keep. Tisha B'Av is a real pain because, Kinos, it's not Yom Kippur, you're shul the whole time, davening, praying for forgiveness. It's a little bit more easy to take seriously. More personalized. Tisha B'Av is about a Beis Hamikdash. It was a long time ago, the spies and all that. Very hard to get into the day, and a lot of the day, there's not much activity going on. We have programs, but it's a different type of a day. But really, it's because something's missing, really, really missing from our lives. Just like people learning Torah day in and day out, thinking, well, I've gone through the whole thing. I've seen it. I'm learning. I'm involved in it, forgetting that they have no access to a whole other level and part of Torah that they need. The Rizal says that these 3 levels are indispensable. You have to reincarnate to get all of them, really 4 levels altogether, and you have to pay a teacher to teach it to you. And if you don't, you're going to come back and reincarnate just to finish it. And until you do, you will not be called an Adam Shalem, a complete person. Are you okay with that? You can accept mediocrity? Well, maybe you can today because no one's breathing down your back, your neck. But on Yom Adin, when God says to you, why were you only mediocre? You had the means to be great, to perfect yourself, to become your own personalized version of the Adam Shalem. It's like, in a sense, this is a very weak analogy, but we have to put things in terms that we can relate. So if you imagine, sometimes they have unique situations where a restaurant, for example, might decide to put the kitchen behind a glass wall so that people in the street can look into the kitchen as they're cooking. Not that many chefs probably like that idea, but it can be good for business, right? And you get to see them cooking the kitchen, and people stop to watch because it is quite a spectacle. A professional chef doing his thing, and he's masterfully doing this and running to the next thing. There are all these sous chefs walking around doing their thing, and it's like a whole balagan. You see the steam going up, and it does look like some very nice things are being done. You can see some of the food being prepared, right? But unfortunately, there's no smell being sent to the street because the ventilation system is broken, and so the smell is getting stuck and trapped in the kitchen itself, and all you can do is see it with your eyes. So you'll watch for a while, and it is fascinating, but at some point in time, you're just going to move on. Enough of that. I'll come back and watch another day, but it's like it's a show. But other than that, you don't feel any drive to go any further. Some other guy, right, walking by the same restaurant, happens to be going by the front door of the restaurant. Someone's coming out, and as a result of that, a whole smell comes out the front door, and he gets to smell it, and whoa, that smells amazing. And then he walks by the window and he sees the chef cooking who's responsible for that amazing smell. And even though he's already past the front door, but the smell lingers. The memory of the smell lingers as he's watching this chef, and he's able to put it together in his head. And it becomes appetizing, and all of a sudden his stomach starts to growl because he starts to get hungry. He says, yeah, he looks at his watch, says, it's lunchtime anyhow, why not? And he goes in, and it works. All because he was able to smell. Seeing is a powerful thing, but it has limitations in terms of how we feel about something. There's no question that you can make connections with people and things from a distance with your eyes, and your eyes are so incredibly important. But somehow smell and taste and touch, and these are very powerful, things that draw us into a situation. Like, for example, look at a window on a boiling hot day. Sometimes you can see a breeze in the trees, and it looks like it's hot because these slow breezes, and it's supposed to be hot, but you're looking from an air-conditioned room, and you're trying to imagine how hot it might be outside. And you look at the thermometer; it tells you it's 90 degrees or 30 whatever Celsius, and it's hot, but you can't feel the heat, right? So it's not real to you. You're behind this glass. And you might want to feel it. You might try, you can't. Even if you imagine it, it's very hard. Although I'm very impressed how easily the imagination can convince you it's time to eat. That he make you hungry, and for specific things by imagining. But that's because you already have experienced these things before. But something you never experienced, right? And you're looking at this window, and you're saying to yourself, "What is it like?" And you open the front door, and boom. Blast of heat comes at you, and whoa, is it ever hot? You close the door right away and go back to the air-conditioned room. Or if you have to go outside, you prepare yourself for the heat. We're like that. Our generation, and countless generations, but even more so in our generation, because not only do we have the disadvantage of all this technology, and I say disadvantage, obviously, technology is fantastic. I'm a big fan of technology, and I use it myself too. But I also understand it's a big disadvantage because it's also a very big distraction. And in a sense, it does a lot of things for us that we should be doing for ourselves. And in a sense, the technology has not enhanced. It reminds me of the fax machine. I was there when, not the exact place they made it, but I was in an office when we bought our first fax machine, and they first came out, and the slogan was to give you more leisure time. And it did not take much time to realize that was not true at all, just the opposite was true. Now that you could fax and delay faxes and send them around the world, and reach people, different time zones, work became almost 24 hours a day. For a lot of people, it took away leisure time. But likewise, technology comes to make our lives easier and simpler, but in a sense, it makes it more difficult because it all depends how you define life. If you define life by what the body wants, you're right. You can become a couch potato and get everything done, right? But if you define life by living in the image of God, then it's just the opposite. It makes it more difficult because a lot of people now, they give up their responsibility and let others do the work for them, or other things do the work for them. And in this generation, we're so distracted. There's so much to be focused on that takes our attention away moment after moment after moment after moment after moment. And as a result of that, we become more detached from the spiritual experience, spiritual reality, to the point that we almost close it out completely. And it's very hard to feel it, very hard to get into it. And it's not impossible, just very hard. So, for example, with the right crowd, the right people, the right moment, the right opportunity, Tisha B'Av can be a very moving experience. But you have to realize that the temple changed everything. There are, just like we have different levels of consciousness. You have meditation, you have yoga, trying to reach different levels of consciousness, and people talk about doing it and how great they feel about it. And it's true. It's true, and they are experiencing it if they're really authentically doing it. And it is great, and it's fantastic. And you can do the same thing with Kabbalah, and you can do the same thing through drugs. You can do the same thing through drinking and alcohol. A little bit illicit and a little less positive way to do it. But we do understand that there are different levels of consciousness. But it's not just different levels of consciousness. Like, for example, Nebuchadnezzar. You ever heard of Nebuchadnezzar? Nebuchadnezzar was the Babylonian king who destroyed the temple, the first temple. The Romans destroyed the second temple, hundreds of years later, but the first temple, which was the one that was really the most active, the second temple did not have the miracles of the first temple. It was a shell of itself, right? We didn't even have the Arna Kodesh, and other things that the Beis Hamikdash required to really fully function. And the first temple had it all. And basically, Nebuchadnezzar destroyed it. But as evil as that was, as evil as that is, and he was, that he believed in God. He even showed covet to God, and God rewarded him for showing honor to God. He believed in him. He knew he was real. Nebuzaradan is his general who's tasked with destroying Jerusalem. And he comes to Jerusalem and he gets in, and the Beis Hamikdash is going to be destroyed, and or was destroyed, and he finds his blood boiling away in the Beis Hamikdash. And he says to the Kohanim there, what's with this blood? Why is it boiling like this? That's a very weird phenomenon. And he says, it was the blood of an animal. He says, no, I don't think so. He compares the blood of an animal, of a kevis, of a sheep to the blood boiling. He says, no, it's not the same. It's not the same blood. You better tell me what this is about. Otherwise, I'm going to start killing all you off until you tell me. So they say, well, there was this prophet Zechariah, and he predicted that if we don't do tshuva, Hashem is going to destroy the Beis Hamikdash. We didn't want to hear what he had to say. We didn't like his criticism, so we killed him. It's a Cohen, killed him in the Beis Hamikdash, and we try to clean it up, and unfortunately, the blood won't go anywhere. It just stays there, boiling away, bubbling away. So Nebuzaradan gets the idea to avenge the blood. So he brings in, Kohanim, and he slaughters them, and the blood's still boiling away. He brings, Pirchei Kahuna, right, which are the youth, the next generation of Kohanim, and kills them, and the blood's still boiling away. And he brings in others, and he's murdering tens of thousands of people, and the blood's still boiling away. So finally, Nebuzaradan says, Zechariah, come on, enough is enough already. If I keep going, there'll be no one left. This is like a person who's like a general of the enemy who destroyed the Beis Hamikdash. He's killing them, and this is what he says. Right? And then after the blood stops boiling, he realizes, wow, if this is what happens to the Jewish people, because they killed one prophet, and God's revenge is so severe, imagine what's going to happen to me who did all this. You know what he does? Weird. So weird. He decides to join the Jewish people, like Nero back in Gittin, we spoke about before, earlier. He decides to go convert. He goes home, I guess divorces his wife and leaves behind his family, and he does a will or whatever, and he goes off and he converts and becomes a Jew, and eventually some of his descendants become big Torah scholars in the end. Like, what a weird thing to do. Speaking of Neron, the same idea. The Neron, he's coming, this is Second Temple times, right? And he's coming to Eretz Israel to destroy the Second Temple. And it's not, I don't know, it's Nero. They always translate as Nero, but I think it was a different general. He shoots 4 different arrows, right? One arrow this way, this way. There's all 4 directions. They all go towards Yerushalayim. He asked a child from Cheder to describe, to tell the verse he learned that day. That was a very popular way for Romans and people to know what God was thinking. So the child says the pasuk, and it's about how God's going to destroy his the Beis Hamikdash and wipe his hands on somebody else. So Nero says, you plan to use me as your scapegoat to destroy the temple, then wipe your hands on me? I have nothing to do with it. So what does he do? He doesn't run the other direction. He runs towards God. He converts instead. And Morris says, or Mayor comes from weird stories. Like who does that? Especially in such a position. Most generals would have said, great, it must be our God doing that, and that's proof I'm going to be successful. Let's go. Let's get it done. He does this. Achashverosh and Haman, the Gemara says, they're having a discussion. And the discussion is, Achashverosh says, I'm worried about touching the Jews. Because everybody, all my predecessors who did, got it, right? They're knocked out of the picture, and I don't want that to happen to me. So I'm concerned about doing anything that might anger their God. And Haman comes back and doesn't say, what are you talking about, you nuts? There's no Jewish God. You still look their exact style. It's all idol worship. He didn't say that. He says, yeah, I know. But you know what? They're sleeping, meaning we're not really focused on redemption, Gula, and we're not doing the mitzvahs properly. We're not, we're going to Gentile feasts and et cetera, et cetera. So he said, the Jewish people sleep, so God goes to sleep too, so to speak, Kiviyachol. doesn't really go to sleep. It's like a Kabbalistic idea, but it means he acts as if he has gone to sleep, as if he doesn't hear what we're saying. He doesn't see what's happening to us because that's where we're behaving. So Haman says nothing to worry about. As long as the Jewish people are sleeping, God will let us do what we want to do. But they're talking about God, the Jewish God, and Belshazzar and Merdach and all the others. They're all talking about God as if he's real, to them. Today, people who believe in God, they believe in Torah, they believe in the whole Sinai experience, act as if they don't fully believe. They're too inconsistent. They're not excited enough. They're not driven towards God. And these people, who are some of the worst in history, can't escape the reality of God. Why is that? How does it happen? A temple, a Beis Hamikdash, and really temple times two. Because even when the temple wasn't there for a while, still the energy comes down. It still does, by the way. All the energy, all the light comes down over the Temple Mount, even though there's a mosque there. Now, basically over the Kotel, and it emanates from there to the rest of the world. The closer you go to the Kotel, the closer you go to the source on earth, to God's light. There's no substitute. Not Lakewood, not Gateshead, not anywhere else in the world, not the Mir in Poland. You can't get around it. You can compensate to some degree, the Shechina Begalos, but there's nothing like Eretz Yisrael. That's the opening to Shemai. There's no, and the Temple Mount, that's the altar. And the lower temple down here, it corresponds to the upper temple up there. Yeah, there's a temple in Shemaim. And now there's a temple in Shemaim, there's a Kohen Gadol. You know what the Kohen Gadol is? Batat. The angel Batat, we don't say his full name. Most people don't say his full name, right? And he's the Kohen Gadol. And they do sacrifices, but not physical animal sacrifices, but something spiritual, the component, in Shemaim, that's the basis of ours down here. And it's an energy that comes down into the world, and it's palpable, like smelling the food at the same time you're seeing being made. Sometimes you're so hungry, you're just famished, and you can't wait to eat, and you're someplace where they're cooking up something delicious, and you can smell it, and it's almost like every part of your body is reaching out for it. You're almost already eating it, enjoying it, because it's all around you. Inside you, outside you, it's a full experience. We don't have a lot of those things. You think and ask yourself, how many times a day do I get really excited about life? Okay, so not every day. How many times a week do I get really excited about life? Okay, so it's not every week. How many times a month? How many times a year? With the Beis Hamikdash, it was constantly there because God was constantly there. It was palpable. You could feel it. It was in the air. Nebuchadnezzar and Achashverosh and Haman and all the other people, Nebuzaradan and all these other people, they didn't want to feel God. They were not looking for a connection. Look at Balak and Bilam. These guys are evil. They're evil. And what are they doing? They're trying to appease the God of the Jewish people. They're not doing Avodah Zorah like the Greeks did or the Romans did later on, way down the road when God already pulled back his light. But they're doing it to God, and they're talking to God, and they're making deals with God. They don't want to. They don't want to have to. It's an embarrassment for them. It's an antithetical for them, but they can't escape it. Because the reality of God is so profound and so pronounced and so in the world and so you just can't escape it. Just like being, strange things come to your mind as analogies. But I remember as a child, going to Florida on vacations in the summertime, and it was so humid. I mean, in Toronto we had humidity too, and some days could also be very humid, but someone could always seem to escape it. But it's like in Florida, everywhere you went, it just like was hanging on you. It's just like literally, like you breathe the air. It's hard to breathe the air, but it's so thick. Oh, that's a negative experience. But with God, it was a positive experience. Now, there's a story of somebody I know that who'd come to Israel before he had become Chazir B'Tshuva. He was not religious, and he came because that's what Jews do. They come to visit the land, some on kibbutzim, just to go a kotel, whatever. It's a Jewish thing to do. It's almost like a rite of passage from youth to adulthood, bar mitzvah, whatever. people come. And he hated it. He hated the food, he hated the people, he hated the land. It was not what he's used to. He couldn't wait to go back home again. So he did. And I thought, that's it. And he came back another time later on. He's older. Now he's traveling around through Europe and all that. And, again, he felt, especially in Jerusalem, the closer he got to Jerusalem, especially got to Kotel, the more uncomfortable he felt. And it was just like something was irritating. It was almost like he couldn't quite put his finger, but and he left early because he couldn't stand it. And in the course of a year or so, he'd become Chozi B'Tshuva. Kodesh Baruch Hu brought him back, and he learned, he became committed and all that. And he came back the following year to learn Torah in yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael. And he said that the moment he got off the airplane, it was like being encompassed by a big hug. It's like just like felt it, like without even thinking about it. It's like just getting off the airplane. In those days, I think you didn't go off until the new airport wasn't built yet, so you didn't go off into the terminal. You got on the tarmac, and then you got into a bus. They took you to the rest of the airport to get your luggage and all that. So the moment you stand on the ground, so you get off the plane, it's like it just felt encased and encompassed, and it was so heartwarming. And he felt like, even at that time, even though he had not come to stay forever, that he knew that's where he was going to end up. It just matched. And he realized that the reason why he had hated it the other two times was because he was not prepared to embrace God. He was feeling the reality of God in Eretz Yisrael. Somehow, maybe perhaps more sensitive than others, but he felt that. But if you don't want it, which is really what's going on to a large degree with a lot of the protesters today in Eretz Yisrael and the leftists, they don't want it. They don't want to have any connection to God or any connection to Torah, any connection to the past. They want to be like the rest of the world. So, they fight against it with everything they have just to get rid of it, because it's like nagging them the entire time. Some people leave. I've spoken to Israelis who left because they couldn't handle it anymore. And years ago. And for the person who wants to embrace it, it's like all-encompassing. And that's without a temple. That's without a temple. If we had the temple, it would just like literally envelop us on all sides. It says, and when the temple, at least the first temple, existed, there was no need to season food. You didn't have to put salt in something or spices into something. You could, but you didn't have to, because everything tasted better. The world was more complete. It was more perfect, the way it's supposed to be. Just like Shabbos is supposed to be an example of such perfection. So on Shabbos, you don't even wish somebody who's not feeling well, refuah shlema, they should feel better. It's almost an admission there's an incompletion. There's a special thing you say that by not screaming on Shabbos, calling than Shabbos, Shabbos should be refuah for you, but it's like a compromise. But the idea is that the Shabbos should be this like a lomabad, this perfection. It's a little bit of a fiction, but for the sake, but it's not really. And really, the truth is, if you understand what is going on and you look into it, you can feel the reality of it. But the temple that we're missing is like missing half of our body, at least. It's like being only a head and no body below. We can't sense things. We can't feel things. There's a Gemara that says that when Ravashi, who was one of the main authors of the Talmud in 499 CE, was giving a class to some Talmidim. He was teaching history, and he wanted to talk about Menashe Melech, the son of Chizkiah Melech. Chizkiah Melech was a righteous individual, almost became Mashiach back in the time of Sanhedrin and Assyria. And Menashe himself, he became an idol worshiper for 22 years and took the country down the wrong road, and he was bad news. Eventually, there's tshuva, but for 22 years, he caused tremendous spiritual corruption, destruction in Eretz Yisrael. And he's, some say he lost his portion of what to come. Right? We basically hold that he didn't because he did tshuva, but many wanted to say that was it. He lost it completely. Anyhow, so he's talking about Menashe, and he refers to him kind of like, tongue-in-cheek. Tomorrow we'll discuss our colleague Menashe. And that night, while he's sleeping in a dream, so Menashe comes to him. Is it really true? Who knows? But Gemara is saying that it is. And so therefore, learn something. And it says that Menashe says, you call me your colleague? your colleague, right? And he says, you come from this and I come from that, and you're calling me your colleague, right? Tell me, what's the halacha in a certain situation when you bake bread? Where do you cut the bread from? And he asked this question. Rav Ashi doesn't know the answer. They have this whole thing in the dream, right? And Menashe says, and you call yourself my colleague, you can't even answer a simple question like that. So it's Rav Ashi's turn. He says, well, you tell me. If you're such a Talmid Chacham, how could you possibly worship idols and be so bad? So he answers back an answer that the first time you see is like, whoa. And then you have to think about it, and then you realize something very, very important that desimplifies life to a large degree. And that is, he says, if you had been there with me, you would have picked up the hems of your tunic. Like in those days, they wore long clothing. You would have picked it up to run after me to serve idols. You, Rav Ashi, the author of the Gemara. And whether the story is true or not, the Gemara is writing it. What is the Gemara teaching us? What is it teaching us? So there's another Gemara that says the following thing. In the time of, I believe, the second Beis Hamikdash, the second temple, I'm pretty sure the second temple, maybe the first temple too, but anyhow, it doesn't make a difference. The point is what happened. So it says that, it's not sure. Anyhow, it says that the rabbis said that the temple has been destroyed. It, referring to the Yetzer Hara, has exiled most of the people. So I guess it's the first temple. And still it's running amok and people are worshiping idols. We know you gave it to us to test us, to challenge us, and to give us reward for passing the test. We don't want the challenge. We don't want the reward. So it says a petik, a piece of whatever fell from Shemaim with the name Emes on it, and to almost signify that they could do something about it. And the prophet said, here's what you have to do. We have to pray to God. So they fasted. They implemented a 3-day fast, and they prayed that the Yetzer Hara should be given over to them, the evil inclination. And it says they were successful. And it came out of the Ark like a lion, and they were able to trap it. And it says when they pulled out one hair from it, accidentally from the beard, so all of a sudden it screamed out. And they were worried that Shemaim might have mercy on the Yetzer Hara. So the prophet said, put him into a lead cauldron and put a lead top on it, because that'll absorb the voice. And they were able to get rid of the Yetzer Hara. And he says, the prophet says, this is the Yetzer Hara for Avodah Zarah, for idol worship. So they killed it. They killed the Yetzer Hara for idol worship. That's what it says. Okay. Now they said, we're on a roll. Things are working out well. The other problem we have is illicit relationships. So let's get rid of the Yetzer Hara for that too. So they tried. They got rid of it, and they were successful. And it says they could not find an egg for anywhere in the country for a person who was sick. They had to get part of the refuah. It's like that. They couldn't find it. So they realized at that time there was a mistake. So therefore they davened to Hashem to only take away the drive for illicit relationships, not all relationships, so that we can procreate and have children, keep the world going. So the second half of the Gemara tells you something that you need for the first half of the Gemara. The second half of the Gemara is telling you that the same drive that people use for illicit relationships is the same drive that's used for kosher relationships, but it has to be channeled. That's what the Torah tells you. It tells you how to curb your desire and channel it in a proper and holy way. So you learn the first one as well, that when they took away the drive for idol worship, what was idol worship? It was a corruption of the drive for God. Idol worship is what happens to people who want to be close to God but don't want to do the work. They don't want to perfect themselves. They don't want to become better people. They just want to have that spiritual connection without the work, like other levels of religion often do, leaving behind Torah mitzvahs and keeping the parts they like the most. Because they want to be connected. They want to have some kind of connection, but not with the sacrifices. So they refashion Judaism in a way that's palatable to them, not to God, but to them. So you learn from this. This is what really Menashe is telling Rav Ashi. You're asking me about my Yetzer Hara at a time that the Yetzer Hara for this doesn't even exist anymore. In your generation, you're trying to understand what it's like for me from where you stand. It's not possible because the Yetzer Hara that drove me is not there anymore. You don't have it. But likewise, you're also not driven to Hashem, to God, the way we were. Because you can't get rid of one without the other. It was a sacrifice, but the lesser of two evils. The rabbis decided it was better to have people not so connected to God and struggling to be, to feel his presence than to have them involved in idol worship flat out, which is completely the opposite of any kind of relationship you can have with God in the end. And that's what the Gemara is telling you, that you have to understand this is the world we're living in. It's a wonderful world. Yes. We have a great time. Yes. We're having a blast for sure. But it's all from the body's perspective. We think we're alive. We're not really alive, not fully alive. We're almost zombies to a large degree. When the base of Mikdash finally comes back, and we should merit to be there when it does, and you only get to merit it by mourning it now, by trying to rebuild that connection as much as possible, and to feel the loss, to cry over it, to understand. You may not know what you're missing, but you should at least know that you're missing what it means to know what you're missing. Somewhere in there you have to realize you're missing something very, very profound. And that without it, it's like missing your heart or missing a part of your brain, God forbid. It's just not, even your plate, it's not the same thing. And you witness the temple and you experience it, what it's like to have. You will look back, because someone once told me, he says, I don't understand how I ever thought I was living when I didn't keep Shabbos. Until I thought, when I was growing up, I knew people kept Shabbos. I know that. I thought, man, they're dead. They're taking a day off and they're not doing anything fun. And I'm going to the beach and I'm doing all kinds of fun stuff, playing sports and all that. And I think I'm the live one and they're the dead ones. And then I discovered what Shabbos was all about, what it really is about. And I realized, wow, it's just the other way around. All that time I thought I was living, I was dying. And now I'm living. And we merit to witness that. We'll look back and say, whoa, it's amazing that we made it this far, given that. Because now I really know what it means to feel alive. So B'ezras Hashem, we should be zeicha to be there when Mashiach comes and puts an end to all the insanity and all the sheker and all those things that interfere with the basic Mikdash coming back, because it is coming. No question about that. And when it does, and we're there, we'll finally be able to appreciate what we're missing the entire time.
Amen. Thank you so much, Rabbi. That was so so deep and wonderful, and giving us a good a lot of food for thought going into our fast, as it were. Everybody have a great Shabbat and an easy fast and meaningful fast. And Rabbi Winston taking a little time off for the summer, Bein Zmanim, and we'll hear from him hopefully at the end of August. Thank you very much for everything, Rabbi.
Thank
Good
you.
Shabbos. Thank you. Good night.